We're going to read the word that's dropped out. We're going to think about this question. Question number one. When Europeans brought their own foods to North America in the 1600s, why had the indigenous North Americans never seen them before? So let's go over to the article, Tasty Traditions, how Native American chefs are celebrating their people's culture through food, and point to Native Americans. You're going to read the word that's dropped out. Native Americans have lived the land that is now the United States for thousands of years. For much of their history, they have made tasty dishes from plants they found close to. They also fished and hunted local game, such as deer and bison. In the 16th century, Europeans arriving in the Americas, they brought foods that Native Americans had never seen before, such as dairy products and wheat flour. Native Americans introduced Europeans to tomatoes, squash, and many other foods we eat today. Stop there. I think we can answer the first question. Let's see. We can answer number two as well. Would you expect that the indigenous peoples had foods the Europeans had never seen? Why or why not? So now we're going to work on number three. So before we keep reading, let's ask the question. Some native groups were forced to move away from their original homes. Why might they have been unable to find or plant their traditional foods on unfamiliar reservations where they were put? So let's just try to answer that question. We're in that third paragraph, the 1800s. In the 1800s, point there, read the word that I drop out. In the 1800s, the U.S. government began forcing tribal nations to leave there where they were experts at growing and preparing food. They were moved on to pieces of land called reservations. This removal, the health and culture of Native Americans, many indigenous peoples could longer find or grow their traditional foods. The government gave them foods made from European ingredients that were high in fat, salt, and sugar. Today, many indigenous people, tribal nations all over the country are working to keep their food traditions alive. Read on to meet three chefs who are sharing these foods with a wide audience. So, answer number three. Some Native Americans were forced to move away from their original homes. Why might they have been unable to find or plant their traditional foods on these unfamiliar reservations? Let's go ahead and read the next question. Number four. Why does Sean Sherman think people should learn about plants that many think are weeds? Wow, okay. Let's read that. Sean Sherman. Sean Sherman is a chef on a mission. Last summer, his company, the Sous Chef, opened a training center in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Now we're going to read the words dropped out. The center, called the Indigenous Food Lab, its aim is to help Native American communities start restaurants and other food. Sherman is a member of Oglala Lakota Nation. He grew up on a reservation in South Dakota. His family ate the foods that supplied by the U.S. government, but Sherman loved to forage for with his relatives, especially sweet berries called chokecherries. They would simmer this fruit to make wasabi, a thick sauce. To help protect rare plants from disappearing, Sherman works with Seed Savers Exchange, a seed bank that collects and shares. He also encourages people to learn about acorns, cattails, dandelions, and other that people today think are weeds. So much food is literally all around us, he says, and all these plants have purposes. Well, I think we just got that answer. Why does Sean Sherman think people should learn about plants that many think are weeds? So we're on page 18. We're going to read the one titled Lois Elaine Frank. Read the word that's dropped off. In 1991, Lois Elaine Frank to publish a book about Native American cuisine, featuring foods from the American Southwest. But publishers rejected Frank's. They told Frank, whose grandfather was Kiowa, that Native peoples didn't have a cuisine. Frank set out to them wrong. She returned to school to study the history of Native American recipes, and indigenous peoples have a variety of food depending on whether they lived in forests, deserts, or the ways Native American communities plant and harvest while foods are very different, she says. Frank went on to write an award winning cookbook. Its recipes include ingredients such as prickly cactus. Today, she owns her own catering company in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Native peoples do, in fact, have a cuisine, she says. It's diverse, delicious, and nutritious. Let's keep rolling. Taylor Barton, Cherokee Nation. When Taylor Barton was in Oklahoma, her favorite dish was kanuchi. Her Cherokee grandmother would make the traditional porridge by grinding hickory into a paste. I revisit those memories every time I taste those flavors, says Barton. Today, Barton teaches people her nation's food. She serves Cherokee dishes at the Vault restaurant in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where she is executive chef. Barton learned about Cherokee as an adult by speaking with her grandparents and by foraging for useful plants with her grandfather. Sometimes experiencing a journey is as simple as learning about your own family, says Barton. So you've looked at different cuisines from um, different tribes and different places. So do indigenous number 5? Do indigenous groups all eat the same foods? Explain your thinking. Use some evidence from the text, especially these last 3 chefs, because you got 3 different examples there.